Hey everyone, my name is Garrett and I am the founder of Ambition in Motion, and I'm so excited, I'm so grateful to have you here for our first workshop. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you've decided to invest in yourself to build a mentoring relationship with someone from your organization so then you can help amplify your own career prospects and opportunities to really help take your career to the next level. I'm really excited for you and what you're going to accomplish over these next 4 months. So during this video, I just wanted to give you an overview of what to expect for the program and how to prep for this upcoming workshop. Now, this workshop's title is called Transitioning into a Managerial Role. So maybe you're in your career and maybe you're about to start entering into a managerial role, or maybe you've been a manager for a while, or maybe you're not a manager quite yet, but you will be. This workshop will be extremely insightful for you. You are going to learn a ton about management and how to properly manage somebody and how to not properly manage somebody. If you have any questions throughout this workshop, please post them in the comments section. So I wanted to give you first an idea of the timeline of the program. Tonight is the first workshop. So pumped about it. All of our workshops are, by the way, going to start at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, and any time in between if you're somewhere in between in the United States. Our goal is that you have at least 3 meetings with your mentor, but ideally you meet more. Ideally, you meet more often than that. If you think to yourself, oh, I should wait, or I should wait for this to happen, or I should wait for that to happen, don't. Get on it right away. Build that relationship. I strongly encourage that, because the longer you wait, the more time you're putting off from building a great mentor relationship, and the more time you're putting off from actually really seeing the results and being able to apply what we're teaching in these workshops into your life. So have multiple areas of support. Take advantage of your mentor. Start building that relationship. Now, those 4 workshops are the first one's on transitioning to a managerial role. The second one is determining when is the right time to pursue additional education, or if it's the right time to pursue additional education. The third workshop is determining when is the right time to switch jobs. And then the final workshop is on how to handle conflict in the workplace. So the really relevant topics, and I think that you're going to really enjoy these workshops and the guest speakers that we brought in for you to learn from during these workshops. We will send you a post-program assessment to get your feedback. So this workshop is going to be roughly an hour long, and we're going to cover a lot of topics on how to transition into a managerial role. And so for you, my focus is on how can you go about making the most out of this. Really, the best way to go about making the most out of these workshops is to interact with us. When I ask a question to you, the audience viewing this, answer it, because here's the thing. I would rather you post your questions in the comment section, because if you got this question, I guarantee you somebody else in the audience does as well. So if we were to answer questions on an individual private basis, we're not really answering everybody's questions. But if you post your questions in the comment section, we can share this with everybody so then they can get their answers just like you got your answer. This program doesn't guarantee you a promotion or a new job. Really, the key is this program's for professionals who want to take their career to the next level. Like, we don't hand things out on a silver platter. Now, by the way, do these types of opportunities happen for the professionals that use this program? Absolutely. But you got to be open to it. You got to be willing to put your time in to go ahead and make the most out of this experience. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm going to come in negatively or skeptically, you're going to get negative and skeptical results. I mean, it's the law of attraction. If you come in with a negative mindset, you're going to manifest a negative mindset. If you come in with a positive mindset, you're going to manifest a positive mindset. It's all about how you view this system, this workshop, this opportunity. So come in with the right idea, with the right mindset, and you can make the most out of this experience. I promise that. So I just want to set the expectation properly. This is a program that does not hand out things on a silver platter. If you work for them, you can absolutely take your career to the next level, but it's about applying them. It's about actively meeting with your mentor. It's about actively networking and actually doing what you can to make the most out of this experience. Ask questions, interact, take advantage of everything we've got for you, and you will get the opportunities you desire. I mean, that's what this program's here for. If you think like, oh, I'm going to do the bare bones minimum, I'm just going to kind of have just 3 phone calls, and we'll keep them at the minimum length of time, and I'm just going to attend the workshop, not take any notes, not really make any comments, not really talk to anybody about what I'm learning, you're gonna get those types of outcomes. That's pretty much it. So I really want to encourage you to make the most out of this program. Take advantage of it. Ask questions, participate, and interact. Treat this program as fuel. Treat this program as fuel to help you get to where you want to be. If you're already burning and going strong, going hard, this program can help you get into the next level and accelerate. If you're barely burning a fire, barely burning an ember, and you really want to rekindle that and get yourself up, take advantage of it. Jump in. But if you think to yourself, you know what, I'm barely burning this ember, I'm not really trying to burn this ember, really there's nothing there, the field can only do so much for you. So the point I'm making is come in with an open mind and a willingness to work hard, and you can achieve what you want. I mean, have professionals use this program to gain a managerial role or negotiate a raise or build deep bonds with their colleagues or expand their networks? Absolutely. But did those outcomes come handed on a silver platter? No, they didn't. It's about how you can apply what you're learning in this workshop to make the most out of this experience. So I want to share with you a little bit about my background, because I think that helps give some context as to who I am, what we're teaching, what we've learned, and why this information is relevant. So for me, I personally needed mentors in my life. And this might sound crazy, but from age 15 to age 19, I was a drug dealer. At the end of my freshman year at Indiana University, I got arrested in an undercover operation by the Indiana University Police Department, and I got 5 felony distribution charges. I was expelled from school, and I had no idea really what I was going to do with my life. It hit my life like a brick wall. I mean, up to that point in time in life, I thought success was you go to school, you get good grades, you get a job, and then you just kind of find yourself, like as if it's puberty, it just comes and hits you. And nobody that I had ever known that I ever thought was successful ever was a drug dealer. So I either had to accepting a failure or redefine my definition of success. So I chose the latter. And it was a great decision for me. Kind of like back to the whole law of attraction thing. I opened my mind to what positively could happen from this situation as opposed to negatively. So I enrolled in a program in St. George, Utah after I got in trouble. And they exposed me to the power of mentorship, both on a personal level and a professional level. On a personal level, they were huge. I mean, they helped me come to grips with how I'd affected my family, my friends, my university, my country. I really didn't think that what I had done really would impact anybody or that anybody would care. And that was so wrong. And I really don't ever want to discount the power of personal mentors, because personal mentors can really help you make some serious just strides and have some serious growth in your life, because ultimately those personal mentors can help see you for you. And don't get me wrong, the professional mentors are amazing as well. And by the way, we can mix those two. They can both be personal and professional mentors. But I really want to stress the importance of being vulnerable in a mentoring relationship, just like I've been vulnerable with you right now sharing my story, because I know that when you're vulnerable, you're much more likely to be attractive in that relationship. You're much more likely to build trust. I mean, shoot, you can't even build trust without vulnerability. You have to have vulnerability. So when it comes to building a mentor relationship, I hope me sharing my story with you has helped inspire you to be vulnerable with your mentor and in your mentoring relationship. And just to kind of finish out my story in terms of how I actually got here from being a drug dealer who moved to St. George, Utah. About a month after living in Utah, I flew back to Chicago for the weekend to let my family know my life's getting on track. On that flight, I'm sitting next to a guy. I took a keen interest in who he is. I asked him questions. I took down notes, shared with him a little bit about me, but really I was focused on who he was and asking him questions and really learning about what he had to say, because people love to talk about themselves. I was learning that through a book I was reading called Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And by the time we landed, he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm the director of ground equipment for SkyWest Airlines." And he offered me an internship doing financial analysis on the spot. Didn't care about my background. He decided to take me under his wing and give me an opportunity, and that was so crucial. That was amazing. He didn't care that I might be going to prison sometime in the future. He didn't care really what my future looked like. He cared about me, and he wanted to give me a chance, and that was so crucial. It helped me really take some serious strides in my life and my career. About a year after living in Utah, I actually got very lucky. While I was in Utah, I started a nonprofit to help young men and women who had made poor choices with drugs and alcohol and help them get mentors too, just like I had gotten mentored by that guy at SkyWest Airlines. And the court system saw that. They ended up dropping my felonies to a misdemeanor conviction. Indiana University had decided to re-enroll me, and I started Ambition in Motion with the idea of how can I help people get connected with their careers. I mean, ultimately for me, my vision is a world where the vast majority of people, not a couple people, but the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they're there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. I'm here to try to help you achieve that. That's all I do, is to help serve you to get you to where you want to be in your career. Because the more satisfied you are with your career, the better of a society we live in, and the more happy society is, the better everybody's lives are. I don't know. That's just my way of trying to make an impact on the world. And, you know, if you're going through this right now as a professional and you're thinking to yourself, like, what is my impact on the world? You know, it could be anything. But I think if you're consciously aware of that and think to yourself, I want to make an impact on the world, that's a great starting point. So the point is, be vulnerable, and think about your impact, especially as it pertains to your story. Now, I want to talk about 3 keys to success for this program. The 3 keys to success for this program are honing your strategy, your story, and your state. Now, I said those in reverse order of importance. Your state is number 1. Physically, what is your state? Like your physiological state. Are you like amped up? Are you ready? Are you good to go? Are you in such a good mood that you're going to take on the world? Or are you stressed out, hunched over your computer, got bad posture, not feeling great? I mean, your first impression is everything. And when you're going into your mentor meeting, or a meeting with anybody for that matter, and you're coming in with some bad body language, I can promise you, you are not going to have a good first impression, and that will kill that relationship. It is very difficult to overcome a bad first impression. So, fortunately, there are some things that you can do to help you get yourself into a positive state. And they take like 30 seconds because your emotions drive your emotions. Now, you might have had the worst day in the world, and you might be thinking to yourself like, oh man, I gotta meet with my mentor right now. I don't know how I can do this. Here's something you can do to get yourself into a positive state. There's a lot of things you can do. You can do a power pose. You can fake smile for 30 seconds. You could fake laugh for 30 seconds. But what I like to do is I like to shake it out, and I like to dance it out, and I like to scream at the top of my lungs. So what I want you to do right now while you're watching this video, and I know it might sound crazy, you might be in your house, you might be in your office, you might be at work, I don't really care. Stand up, shake it out, shimmy it loose. Stand out. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah, just let it loose, let it out, let it go. And the reason why I'm telling you to do this is because you are releasing endorphins to your brain, getting blood flowing to your brain. What this does is it gets you into a positive mood. It takes you from wherever you're at and puts you at a 10. It gets you ready to go. And your physical body, your physiology, your body is saying, thank you. I'm ready for this. I'm ready to take on the world. Your state is crucial. So when it comes to a mentor meeting, get your state right. You're going to give a positive first impression if you get your state right. If you're screaming at work, good for you. Amazing. I'm proud of you. That's awesome. You know, people might think of you and look at you like a weirdo, but that's okay because this is not a coolness contest. This is about you making strides in your career and getting a positive first impression with your mentor and with anybody that you want to meet. Now, the second key is your story. Now, what's a story that you tell yourself? Do you tell yourself a story for why you won't be successful or for why you will be successful? I mean, your story could be, oh, well, you know, I'm an introvert, so I couldn't possibly be good at networking or putting myself out there or trying to get a raise or try to be a manager because, you know, I'm just an introvert. Or maybe you think to yourself, like, I'm an extrovert. I'm crazy around people. I can't even handle it. I'm a word vomiter. I just can't even contain myself around other people. I couldn't possibly be good at networking or in a managerial position. If you tell yourself a story for why you will not be successful, you will not be successful. But if you tell yourself a story for why you can be successful, you can manifest that outcome. If you tell yourself a story, if you literally play in your mind how a situation could go the most positive way you could possibly go, you will get yourself to where you want to be. So I want to ask you right now, and I would love if you could post in the comment section, what is a story that you tell yourself for why you will be successful? Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? How are you going to do that? Lay out your story of where you're going. It could be the next 3 months. It could be the next year. I don't really care. But put it out there for how you're going to be successful. Share it with the world. Share it with your community here because what that does is it empowers other people to be vulnerable and share their story as well. I'd love if you could share your story of where you want to go in the comment section. Now, the last key is your strategy. So what is the strategy that you're going to do to help you get to where you want to be? Now, this workshop is all about how to transition into a managerial role. So the strategy is going to be all about how can you go about becoming a better manager. Now, take the skills that we're teaching in this workshop with our guest speaker. Take these skills and apply them. One of the things that I love to do when it comes to strategy is to set up a routine. So what is something that you can do on a regular basis to help you reinforce this skill that you're learning in this workshop? Because if you're just here in this workshop and you're just watching this video and maybe you're taking notes, like that might stick. But if you actually teach it to somebody else, that is definitely going to stick. Exponentially, you are much more likely to remember the information that you're taught if you teach it to somebody else. So what I want you to do when it comes to strategies, I want you to take what you're learning during this workshop and I want you to apply it and teach it to somebody else. This could be a friend, it could be a stranger. I don't really care. But teach something that you learned that you thought was impactful and powerful to you. I love if you could do that, because if you can, you're going to reinforce this information, and this program, this workshop, this whole experience is going to be so much more powerful to you because you are reinforcing what you are learning. So the way that you can practice, find an accountability partner, teach them the skills that you are learning, something that you learn. And it could be anything. Like whatever nugget of wisdom that you heard from me or from our guest, teach that to somebody else. That will help you reinforce it. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited for you to embark on your mentor relationship. And in this mentor program, I'm really excited to get started with our guest speaker. Hey everyone, so excited to dive into our workshop for this evening. Topic is how to transition into leadership. Now, this is something that you're probably going through. You're probably considering, okay, I'm early on in my career, and maybe I'm aspiring to become a leader, or maybe I'm already in a leadership position, and I want to avoid maybe the common hurdles, the common pitfalls that a lot of new, younger leaders face when entering into those leadership positions. Fortunately, we've got a great guest with us here this evening. We've got David Macauley. Dave and I have worked together for many years now in our executive mastermind groups. He has helped not only lead his own teams, but helps leaders with leading their own teams. Dave, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, Garrett.
So Dave, if you could just share with us a little bit of who you are, what you do, and how'd you get to doing the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Garrett mentioned, my name is David Macauley. I am the founder and CEO of WendWorks. We are a organizational development company and leadership development company, which means we help leaders and the people that they serve build better businesses to do what it is that they do. So that is our business model, is helping people understand what they do and find ways to do it better.
Very nice. How did you get into this work? How'd you go about helping other teams out, improving their own performance, and doing what they do best?
Absolutely. My pleasure. So it all started way back. No, I grew up in a entrepreneurial family, so I kind of cut my teeth on the shop floor, so to speak. My father had a series of businesses in the manufacturing space, starting with lighting, and then moving into furniture and water beds when those were hot and that sort of thing. So I always kind of grew up around business, manufacturing, process, what have you. And up through high school, ended up taking on progressively more and more responsibility within the family business, to the point where when I kind of finished up my high school career, I had a fair degree of work experience through the family business that I took with me to my college years in undergrad. After kind of going off to college and seeing what they knew, I ended up in higher education for a little while. My first master's program was in educational leadership with a graduate certificate in social justice. Figured out about halfway through that I kind of missed the elements of execution and sustainability that were automatically incorporated into a business, right? Where it's education is good, but you have to
ask, why'd
yeah.
you pursue that degree in social justice? Why'd you pursue that path as like where you were going to go for your education?
Yeah. So part of my family background, I mentioned on my dad's side, was entrepreneurial. On my mom's side, I'm the son of a teacher, and her sisters are teachers. So my mom's a teacher, my aunts are teachers. My grandfather on her side was a Lutheran minister, so he was constantly preaching and teaching. So there's a long history of teaching on my mother's side of the family. And so that was always something that was in my blood, even in a business setting within my dad's business. Typically, I was the one that would train the new employees on how to do their job, how to do installs, how to set up jigs for repeat fabrication and batching things out. So I've always kind of been drawn to teaching roles. And when I went into college and was kind of trying to think, well, what next? Education seemed like a natural fit. But about halfway through my first my first master's program, I realized that I missed that execution, that application, that practitioner perspective that you kind of automatically get in a business setting where, yes, we need to learn things, but there's a focus on practical application and sustainable value, right? So we have to be able to take $100 worth of stuff and use it to produce $200 worth of value, right? So there's the teaching and educational component that I liked, but then you actually got to play poker for money and use it, right? Not for a grade, but for tangible market feedback in the form of revenue, cost, those sorts of things. And I found that exciting. So ultimately pivoted out of the education track and went into corporate in the finance arena.
Okay. Why did you choose the finance arena, and how did you transition from the finance arena into what you're doing today?
Yeah. So I looked for things that would utilize my skill set in teaching and where there was a large or rather steep learning curve, right? Where people, when they were getting started, needed to learn a lot, needed to know a lot, needed to be educated in order to make good decisions. And the financial industry certainly fit the bill there. If you are not educated about financial products, services, how to do future value calculations or present value calculations, it can be very easy to make misinformed decisions. So that was a great kind of business application of my desire to be in a teaching role. So I started as a retail advisor, and then from there progressed through a number of different roles, including starting up, doing kind of helping to lead an internal startup sales unit, and then that kind of transitioned into some opportunities to do internal process improvement type work, and then eventually leading. I was in a position to lead a national sales program for about 8 years, working with independent business owners underneath the corporate kind of franchise model and helping them improve their sales and customer acquisition. And through that process, those series of process improvement, internal change consultant, and sales program leadership roles, I also had the opportunity to go back to school on the company dime and get my MBA and ultimately my doctorate as well in organizational development and change management.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I think that whole piece right there is that's the meat and potatoes of this workshop. How do you go from an individual contributor to a manager of people? What did your organization see in you? Why did they choose you over other people in the company to take on this role? How did you communicate that this is what you were interested in? What was that process like?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I will say is rarely will an organization see something in you that you don't see in yourself. So I came into the conversation looking for what the next steps were going to be, future steps, opportunities to progress and grow. And I will say that my actual path that I ended up taking was very different than the path that I thought I would be taking when I went in, right? Because the positions that I ended up taking didn't exist when I was hired into the firm. I was hired into an existing job description exactly once. The rest of the time I was there, it was a series of spotting needs or opportunities, making a business case for somebody to address those needs and opportunities, and then arguing for myself to be that person. And in doing that iteratively, there was no possible way that I would have been able to know, what I ended up doing when I was first hired. But I came into the initial conversation saying, look, I want to understand how to do this job and succeed at it. I want to do it well. But I also want to know what these skills will prepare me to do next, because here's the direction that I want to go. Do you think this position here would be a good preparation for moving in that direction of increasing leadership and responsibility?
Interesting. So I want to let's dive deeper into that because I think a lot of students are probably watching this and they're thinking to themselves like, okay, this is cool. Like I see a lot of areas of need within my business, but I've gone out and proposed them, and my boss or my CEO or my owner has said it's a cool idea, but we don't really have budget for it. It doesn't really logistically make any sense. I know we've discussed this before where you can have
Sure.
these pie in the sky ideas and they're like, great. What did you need to do to communicate this was a real business case where you could say, okay,
Mhm.
right now we're doing it in XYZ manner. If we could add ABC into this mix, that not only can reduce our costs, but also increase our revenues. I think I could be the person to lead this charge for this sort of thing. How did you go about creating that business case? Because I think a lot of people just look at the high level as to here's a big problem and I'm going to solve
Sure.
it, but not really like realizing like, is it, overall, is it a huge problem to solve? Not really. I think sometimes people don't understand how to see the big picture, I guess is what I'm trying to say. How did you go about
Yeah.
seeing the big picture in all this?
Great question. So I'm going to answer that in two ways. One is before you start making business cases of your own, learn from people in your organization who have been successful in the past at making business cases for change and innovation, and unpack what they did, because that will kind of get you up to speed on how to talk the talk and walk the walk, so to speak. And if the first kind of big jump is not your idea, that's fine. And in fact, that's normal, right? If it is your idea, also fine, also wonderful. But don't feel like you need to solve all of the business's issues and challenges the first time out of the gate, right? You're much better off if you can boil it down from, and this is what I was going to say on the second way that I'll answer this question. There is a talent and skill involved in taking something from a pie in the sky and boiling it down to a raisin in the hand, right? A lot of leaders can get their mind around, all right, what's the next step? You want to have the pie in the sky and the eventual, and this is what it could turn into and all that. But when you're inside of an organization and you're trying to get buy-in into the direction that you think that the company needs to go to solve some problems, the faster you can get out of the grand vision and the more you can get focus on, and here's the next step in that grand vision, why it works, how it works, and how it relates to things we already do, but now we're doing it in a better way, the faster you can get to yes.
Yeah, I love that because I think what you bring up is this concept of minimizing friction. Like at
Mhm.
the end of the day, organizations, everybody loves the pie in the sky. Everybody loves I've got this visions of grandeur for where we can go and what we can do and all these amazing things. But if it requires a Herculean effort to go about getting to that outcome, no way anybody's going to buy
Yep.
into it. So if you are proposing change, if you're proposing a new role, it shouldn't be a scenario where you not only need to be in the leadership position, but also need to have 10 direct reports doing all these different things
Yep.
and, have $1 million budget to spend on marketing or operations or whatever on top of that. Like that's a Herculean
Correct.
effort that very few companies are going to go towards. I also love
Yep.
what you brought up was, and I might be paraphrasing here, but just like more or less owning your craft within the role that you're doing. Because the
Yep.
likelihood someone's going to put you in a position to take on something new when you've done the current role not so great is pretty low. It's like, I know I
Yeah.
haven't been doing my current job really well, but I'd like to be doing something different that I think I could be doing better.
Yeah.
Not
And
like
you have to do both, right? Because
yeah.
it's not enough to just be good at your job. We all know plenty of folks that get promoted because they're good at their first job, and then it turns out that they're a terrible manager, right? We've all heard of the Peter principle, right, by Dr. Peter, where people get promoted to the level of their own incompetence, right? So being good at your job is an important prerequisite, but it's not enough, right? It will create opportunities, but you need to be developing yourself on two fronts while you're in the job that you're in. One is, as you say, I like the phrase owning your craft that you have right now. And then number two is developing your leadership ability to boil the pie in the sky down to the raisin in the hand and be able to say, okay, here's the next steps. Here's how, given where we are, we can start pushing pebbles in order to create the avalanche that you see in your mind down the line. You need to see those connections, but you don't necessarily need to sell the entire organization on the entire avalanche, just the opportunity associated with pushing the pebble right now.
Well, and the interesting thing about pushing the pebble is that what you say is going to happen once you push that pebble must happen for you to then apply for the next step forward. Because
Absolutely.
if you come in and say, hey, I want to push this pebble forward, and this is also why a lot of companies struggle with big innovation changes, is because it sometimes requires pushing the pebble forward 15 times before you can actually start seeing a return on that. But
Absolutely.
if you're bringing this idea to the table, and you're like, hey, I want to push this pebble once, you better ensure that you're getting some return on that quickly. So then your company can be like, okay, cool. We saw it. We like it. How did you go about showing your use case, your business case for why shortly after when you proposed the new job for yourself within an organization, that it was worthwhile for the company to keep investing in that?
Yeah, so when I got involved with the new internal startup, the company that I was with, we were a financial services and sales company that had been around for over 100 years. And at that point, had literally never sold a product over the phone, right? And there were people in the organization that were saying, well, is that even possible? You know, will our customers buy financial services and products over the phone? We don't know. And I got connected with a coalition of folks that were thinking, well, we don't know for sure, but it's probably worth a try. And so I kind of hitched my wagon to that group and started contributing to the conversation about how that might work, right? And ended up getting included in the initial set of hires to say, well, let's see if we can create a telephone sales unit. And I was able to take ownership of a specific piece of that larger goal of, well, what should a telephone sales unit look like? I came from a sales background at that point, having been a retail advisor. And so there was a natural fit between what I had done and what I wanted to take on, which was kind of piloting what should advisory sales look like within this larger kind of developing effort. So that put me in a position to kind of craft my own responsibilities, but without having to sell the entire thing, because there were other folks that were aligned with me. So it was creating an opportunity to lead something without having to lead the whole thing, right? Finding the opportunities for leadership that were a good fit, both for my interest and that others that were involved were able to see the connections, right? They could see the dots of where I had been and extrapolate and say, yeah, okay, I can see how you're the right fit for that role.
I like it. So let me take a moment to ask the students a question real quick. Post in the comments section. Looking at the current work that you're doing today, if you could expand your role into something new, something bigger, something different, something maybe the company's never even done before, what would that look like? Post in the comments section. You know, if you could take your previous experience or things that you observe as opportunities within the business, and you could say, I'd like to take that on as an opportunity to help to grow the company, what would that be? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. So, Dave, you get transitioned into leadership by creating your own role,
Yep.
essentially. You're now leading a team of people. What was an early mistake you made as a leader?
Yeah, so I think one of the early mistakes was not being prepared for the transition from colleague to manager. When you develop relationships with folks and then you now are suddenly their boss, there is a different dynamic to the relationship that you need to acknowledge. And it is something that you have to be prepared for, um, and just know that it's coming. And it's one of those where until you're there, until you've experienced it, you can have people tell you about it all day long, but there's a certain awkwardness that you just have to be prepared to wade through, kind of like leadership puberty, where you go, oh, all of a sudden my limbs don't work the same way that they did last summer, right? And give yourself a little bit of grace and permission to be awkward in that space, but know that you will come out the other side. It is not a forever state of being. It's a liminal space, a transitional space until you get comfortable in your leadership skin again. And it tends to come from places not like, oh, Garrett and I, we used to be colleagues and now I'm your boss and I'm going to lord it over you. That's not where it comes from. Where it comes from is the fact that all of a sudden the little side comments and things, the sarcastic remarks that you and I used to, share and laugh about in the break room or the lunchroom, well, all of a sudden, when I'm at a leadership level, those same kinds of comments that were, collegial banter can take on other characteristics. Like, well, all of a sudden now you, Garrett, are wondering, well, oh, does Dave know something that I don't because he's in those meetings? Does that mean that our division is going to get downsized, right? When just because I made a crack about having to save 10 cents on a napkin, by going to the cheaper version in the break room. So those are things your words take on more weight. Your actions are viewed differently, even when you're using the same words and doing the same actions that you may have been doing for years prior to stepping into that leadership role.
So are you almost saying that it's almost like a respect, a combination of respect for yourself, respect for the colleague, and respect for the business has changed when you stepped into that leadership position?
I mean, maybe that's a part of it. I think more is that the higher up you are in an organization, the greater the assumption on other people and people you're leading, the greater the assumption is about the level of access to information and insight you have. And that assumption may or may not be true.
Got it. So in this scenario that you give of just like maybe making a little wisecrack here and there about saving 10 cents on a napkin, would someone share that with you and you would, I guess maybe to be clear, and maybe just so that I can clarify, was it almost like you would say, no, that's not appropriate, we don't say that anymore? Or is it more like, hey, you know what, better to save 10 cents on a napkin than lose Johnny over in accounting?
Yeah, so those are the kind of comments that when they're made by a colleague, it's like, oh, ha 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 ha, right? But if your boss makes that same comment, it's equally likely that the people hearing the comment may go, ah, ha ha ha, we're in funny land again, or, oh man, does Johnny know his job's at risk?
Yeah.
And that's where kind of the water cooler conversation can accidentally get weaponized in a bad way. So you just have to be a little bit more careful and aware of what you're saying. And I used the puberty analogy before because it's like you're in the same body at 15 that you were in at 10, but your proportions are very different, right? How you move and how you react in space and how that space reacts to you changes. And so, for example, I may even choose to make that same comment about Johnny in accounting, but I would probably follow it up if when I'm in a leader, I would either choose not to say it in the first place, or if I did, I would follow it up with a, to be fair, Johnny's job is just fine. Nothing. Johnny's doing everything that he needs to do, right? To make it clear when I'm speaking from a standpoint of jest versus actual knowledge of something going on. And one of the things that you'll find is typically the I mentioned the higher up in the organization you are, the greater the assumption of the knowledge and insights you have. Often the people that report to you have much grander assumptions about the conversations and level of insight that you have into any leadership above you, their decision making, than you really have. And that's especially true in large organizations with multiple layers of management. Oftentimes, the one level up who's supervising, the entry level positions, those entry level folks assume that you have lunch with the CEO on a regular basis, which may or may not have any bearing with reality.
It's like all of a sudden you're like at a major Fortune 500. Let's say it's just Salesforce for a second, and they've got a whole department in the Philippines that they decided to lay off, and you're just like one level up from being an individual contributor. You're like barely a manager, and your team comes to you and is like, it's your fault that all these poor people in the Philippines got laid off. You're like, I haven't met anybody from the Philippines once in my life at this company. This is an 80,000 person company. I have no idea how these decisions are made. But so
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's an interesting assumption that you're making there that I think that makes a lot of sense. On another, just kind of like staying in this realm of topics, I think some students might be thinking to themselves, like, okay, my company might not be as forward thinking or innovative as your company was in terms of proposing new ideas. Maybe they've got a very legacy business. They want to stick to that legacy. Is there a way that students go about communicating that they are eager to learn and grow and develop new things without coming off as an ultimatum? You don't want to come out and say, hey, if I don't get promoted within the next 6 months, I'm bouncing. But at the same time, communicate that, like, hey, I'm interested in growing and not particularly comfortable with staying at this position for the next 30 years.
Sure. So first and foremost, you have to articulate and communicate that desire, right? Don't assume that the people that you work with or that you work for know your internal monologue, right? Because unless it comes out your mouth, even if you are a terrible poker player and people say that they can read your face, if it doesn't come out your mouth, we can't tell it's between your ears, right? So being able to articulate your desire is a critically important first step. Beyond that, there are always opportunities to learn and grow both within an existing job description and potentially prepare yourself for other job descriptions, pretty much no matter what the size of the company is. Now, the smaller the company is and the more static it is in terms of things don't change very often, or the business model is what it has been and forever shall be kind of thing. The smaller it is and the more stable it is, the slower some of those things happen naturally. But even at their very, very slowest, they still happen. There's almost always an opportunity somewhere that can be taken advantage of. For example, maybe a critical vendor in the supply chain decides to close up shop. Maybe they get acquired or go out of business. Well, that's an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, to say, hey, this critical input to my existing job has changed. I would like to take on the responsibility of figuring out how we replace that, right? And you can demonstrate your ability to think creatively to solve those problems, even as they feed into your existing job description. That's a way to develop yourself. And there's also turnover, or whenever there is a significant change. Lewin talks about the freeze-thaw cycle of organizations, where even the most steady organizations that have been frozen in time and in place for a long time, every so often experience situations that thaw the freeze, right? Kind of make things liquid. Some people talk about it as a theory of punctuated equilibrium. Like there's a balance, and then something comes to upset the balance. It's the same thought process. Well, in that period of transition, those are usually your windows of opportunity. And if you wait until you see the transition in flight, it's too late. You have to prepare yourself during the periods of relative stability so that when you spot those opportunities, the punctuated equilibrium, the thaw cycle where things are flowing and things are malleable, to be able to draw on your track record and state your case for nudging the organization in the direction that you think it should go. And sometimes you're going to get a yes, and sometimes you're going to get a no, but you've done what you can to influence the overall direction prior to it refreezing and finding its steady state of equilibrium until the next transitional moment.
I like that. I also really like what you just said about just clearly communicating. I think that's something that a lot of people really struggle with, especially when communicating to their boss. I'll hear some people when they talk to their friends make it seem like as if they were crystal clear and blatantly apparent as of what their intentions were.
Yeah.
But in reality, the thing that they'll say when they're with their boss is, hey boss, I was thinking maybe kind of if it were possible, if I could, if I may, put out a suggestion, perhaps if it could be even considered that maybe I could, I don't know, maybe take on maybe some additional responsibilities, maybe, but only if you were thinking that was okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to overstep or anything like that. And the boss is like,
Yeah.
right, man, cool,
Good to know.
yeah, good to know. See you on the flip side. But instead, one thing I've seen a lot of people do that I found to be effective was, hey, boss, one of my goals is to get to XYZ outcome. I'm trying to wrap my head around how I could possibly work towards getting that outcome within the next 6 to 12 months. Can you help me create a formula or a plan or a path towards helping me achieve some of these additional roles and responsibilities?
Yep.
Now your boss is part of helping you get there versus you demanding that you get there. And also you're clearly communicating where you're trying to go, because that's really critical in that whole process.
Yeah.
So
I like the comment that you made about enlisting the help of your upline, right? Making them an ally. But I also want to point out something else that your comment made me think about or brought to mind, which is that especially with younger employees, they often think about career progression in terms of position descriptions and titles, right? Where it's like, well, the outcome that I'm shooting for is I want to be the VP of sales in the next, whatever, right? You don't need a destination in order to articulate a direction. You can absolutely go in and say, hey, I'm really wanting to move in the direction of fill in the blank, sales, operations, accounting, governance, legal, whatever area of interest you have. You don't have to pick a specific position on the org chart in order to articulate that direction, and enlist the help of your supervisor to come up with some concrete steps and opportunities that would help you move in that direction. Odds are by the time that you got there, the job that you had originally picked out either won't exist anymore, or there's going to be one or two new ones in that same space that may actually be a better fit for you. And a lot of people take on a lot of pressure of, oh no, I don't want to pick, I don't want to shoot for a job title that's too high and people will think I'm arrogant and impatient, but I don't want to go too low or they'll think I'm not ambitious. You can skip all of that and just say, hey, I want to move in this direction. Can you help me head that way?
yeah, no, I like that. I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because then you become less obsessed with titles and more obsessed with the actual work being done. Because at the end of the day, your title doesn't really matter. You're going to get the experience in the area that you want to get experience in anyways. And if all of a sudden by getting that experience, you become eligible for getting that title, that'll be a byproduct of you actually having gotten the experience in your previous title up to this point. So I'd love to ask the students a question real quick. What are some new experiences that you would like to pursue with your own? I guess maybe let me ask this question a different way. What is a conversation you would like to have with your boss about laying out your career path and your career growth sometime over the next 12 months? Post it in the comment section. How do you plan on going about having that conversation? I like to learn about it. So, Dave, one thing that I think a lot of young leaders struggle with is how to have hard conversations. I think sometimes when times are great and the economy is just flowing and business is just going up and up and up, and people are like, oh, you need to increase headcount? No worries. We'll give you 3 more people. Oh, you need some budget for this? No worries. We got you. And then you build this almost, I feel like sometimes I see this false sense of hubris where it's like, I've been a manager for XYZ number of years and I'm a killer manager. And it's like, well, hold on a second. You've really not had to go through any difficult conversations during any difficult period because everything's been sunflowers and rainbows up to this point. What is something that a young manager, young leader can do to prepare for how to have some hard conversations with direct reports?
Yeah, great question. And I'm going to answer that in two ways. One is practice. At the very least, have a dress rehearsal in your head and think through how that conversation, kind of best case scenario could go, worst case scenario could go, and war game it with yourself, right? Ideally, you'd be able to practice, and this is part number 2 of my answer, with a set of colleagues, trusted colleagues that you can talk some of these things out with, right? If you can actually have somebody in real life do the worst case scenario with you, right? Where you say, hey, I got to go fire somebody. Can you play the part of a disgruntled employee who wants to set the thing on fire, and actually do it for in real life, real time? Odds are, when you actually do have that hard conversation, it's not going to go nearly as badly as the friend or the colleague that helped you experience the worst case scenario. And it's not the first time that you're figuring out how to express these kind of nuanced things, whatever the nature of the difficult conversation is. Because it's difficult, that means by nature that it's probably got some complex layers to it that you have to navigate. So do yourself the favor and don't make the first time you sign up to go bat at home plate be in the World Series. Figure out how to do it in a practice setting a couple times before you do it for real.
I love that. Yeah, I think I've seen people do this before where they'll be like, oh, I'm great at winging it, or oh, this is gonna be a hard conversation, I'm gonna take a shot. And it's like, do not do that. Practice, practice, practice. Like taking a shot, trying to like fade out the pain of having this conversation is not going to make the conversation go away or go any better. It's going to make it go worse. So yeah.
I would also say that in addition to practicing for the moment itself, think through whatever the next steps are, could be, or should be. Because most of the time, so let's say, for example, if you do have to lay somebody off or put somebody on a performance improvement plan, right? Mm-hmm. Step 1 is usually going to be some form of shock or surprise or resistance, possibly some anger and frustration, right? But if that person is treated with respect and communicated with in a clear way, where there's not a lot of those ums, ahs, weasel words and minimization, right? Where we just say, hey, we got a problem. Here's the problem. And here's what's going to happen. The most common response after processing that first flush of whatever the emotions are in response to that situation is going to be a desire for control, right? A way to reset somebody's mental, physical, emotional, spiritual equilibrium. And nothing does that quite as well as being able to articulate what's coming next, right? Because we just had a big surprise, a big shock, a big upset. And being able to say, okay, here's where we go from here, and coach them through what's coming next, gives them that sense of control, rights the ship, even if it's not a fun what comes next, right? We're going to go on a performance improvement plan. It means that, we've got these check-ins and this cadence. Do you have any questions, right? Or we're having to let you go. The next steps are we're going to go to your desk and clear it out. You qualify for the severance, so you're going to talk to so-and-so. Like, even conversations that are really tough, being clear about the next steps is a way to be kind clarity is kind in those situations. And also just know that your anticipation of that difficult conversation is probably going to be about 10 times worse than the actual conversation itself.
That's right. I love to ask the students a question real quick. Post in the comment section, when you've had to have a difficult conversation with a colleague, what did you do well? What do you want to improve on? Post in the comments. So, Dave, this has been great. This has been very insightful. Last question I've got for you. What resources do you subscribe to help you improve your leadership abilities?
Yeah, no, great question. So uh, you are usually the best student when you're learning something in order to teach it to somebody else. So as somebody who is actively engaged in organizational development, leadership development, and change management, I'm constantly on the hunt for new research and insights into what's the latest developments in the field. So I do subscribe to things like publications from the Academy of Management, the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology. I'm also a member of the Academy of Human Resource Development, which is different than SHRM. SHRM is more about human resource management. The Academy of HRD is more about organizational learning, process improvements, kind of more of an OD, IO psych kind of approach. And I'm also a regular user of less academic resources. For example, there's a wonderful series of podcasts from NPR. The series How I Built This is a wonderful kind of walk through different leaders' journeys to building whatever organizations they built. And I pull a lot of insights from that. I would also say that it behooves you to find a resource for yourself, a peer resource. So like I run peer advisory teams and I do executive coaching. I also make sure that I have a team for me where I can bring my challenges and opportunities to a group of my peers, where I'm not there to speak into their challenges and pour into their issues solely. I'm also there to bring mine to the table so that they can speak into mine and provide me that same level of support, right? So finding things that refill your mental, emotional, and kind of intellectual fuel is critically important.
I was gonna say, yeah, Dave's in our executive mastermind groups, and so that's awesome. Well, cool. Well, Dave, this has been great. This has been great insight for students. Students, thank you all for being here. Dave, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. See everybody.
My pleasure, Garrett.